Politicians are often lambasted whenever they change their mind. But you said this 10 years ago. How can you say this now? I don't know about you, but I've often changed my mind. I've changed my mind many times. It can be about minor things. I thought I wanted something, and then something else happened, and it's like I saw things in a different light, or I thought this was going to be perfect, and then when it started to unfold in my life, I realized that's not quite it, or maybe because of time and maturity, I came to a better understanding of a particular situation or circumstance, and I changed my mind. I think differently today than I did years ago. And I would hope so. It's what the gift of time gives us. You and I are not like God. We are not perfect in our decisions and in our choices. We don't see everything all at once and know everything like God and his angels do. You and I learn and grow and mature. And time gives us the ability to change our minds. Hopefully, to change our minds for the better. That we are turning more toward God in those decisions and in the change of our mind. Jesus uses an example today in his parable to highlight for the chief priests and the elders of the people, those who seem to have everything buttoned up and perfect on the outside. Those who seem to be saying yes to God. They're fulfilling their religious obligations. They're supposedly living the way they ought to be living. And yet the Lord uses them as the example in this gospel to be that one son who says, yes, Father, I will work in your vineyard, and then doesn't. He says the right thing. He appears to do the right thing, but then fails in obedience. Doesn't carry that obedience out, changes his mind for the worse. Maybe he never intended and just put on the right face. We don't know. But I think Jesus uses him as the example for the scribes and the Pharisees. For you all appear to be saying yes to God and doing what you're supposed to be doing, and yet there is judgment in your heart. There is envy in your heart. There's a refusal to hear the word of God when it comes to you authentically because it challenges your own mindset and what you think about God. But then there was that other example, the other son who said, no, I'm just simply not going to do it. And then time went on and he realized, I should probably go do this thing. And the Lord uses that as the example for those in society who seem to be sinners, those tax collectors, those prostitutes, those people on the fringes of society. They appear to be saying no to God. I'm not going to live in a life of purity and goodness. I'm not going to build up the community. I'm not going to be a part of any of this. I'm going to do my own thing. But as time went on, they heard the preaching of John the Baptist and said, yes, I will follow. That gift of time is so precious for us, the gift of God's love and mercy, that God pours out his mercy on us because he knows that most of us are rarely completely in a state of grace or completely in a state of mortal sin. Most of us are probably vacillating between the two. We are on the way. Conversion is a journey. Conversion literally means to turn with or to turn toward. And so if we are going to convert, if we are going to turn towards something, several things have to happen. Imagine if you get into your car and you put in the wrong coordinates for directions to a place you don't know where you're going. And you get going and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I am not going in the right place. So what happens? You're driving along, you have a realization. You begin to slow down, you pull over and you stop. You punch in the new coordinates, you turn the car around, and you begin accelerating towards your new destination. At every step of that journey represents a conversion, that something is happening that is moving the heart. But if I were following you, or if I were observing this and I saw you heading in the wrong direction and maybe slowing down and pulling off to the side of the road, I'm saying, where the heck does this person think they're going? What's going on? They're clearly in the wrong. I don't know that they are in the process of conversion. I don't see that they are turning towards the Lord, even if it doesn't appear to be so. Jesus encourages us and admonishes those who sit in judgment over their brothers and sisters to remember that perception doesn't always indicate what's going on inside, nor are we able to see where on the journey of conversion someone is. And so I think the Lord challenges us in two ways today. Number one, he encourages us to be patient with one another, to give each other the time that we need and the opportunity to change. It's a precious gift. And as human beings, it's one of the gifts that we have been given so that we can hear the preaching of the gospel and be converted and profess faith. Secondly, it reminds us to be patient with ourselves when we find ourselves having made a mistake or sinned again and again or turned down the wrong path or don't exactly know where we're supposed to be going, that we have time to pull over, to stop, and to look at things differently. In human life, the ability to convert is one of the greatest mercies God gives us. And I think it's one of the greatest mercies then that he encourages us to embrace as well. The first Sunday of October is always known as Respect Life Sunday. And we think about all of the different ways that we as Christian people are called to respect human life, that we're called to respect and defend life in the womb. We're called to respect and defend life that is very sick and frail and elderly. We're called to defend and respect those whose lives are on the fringes or on the margins, and they don't seem to have everything buttoned up and put together. We're even called to respect and defend the lives of those in prison. We don't often think about capital punishment as a life issue. But the church has been very solid in her teaching and very forceful in the teaching against capital punishment, particularly in recent years. And it has nothing to do with our politics, but rather it has everything to do about the gospel. That we are required to give people time to convert. That we are to look at one another in love and help them find salvation. And that gift of time is so important, not only for us, but especially for those who seem so far off the path, that they have that time. The admonition against capital punishment recognizes that there, of course, is an objective reality, that in order to defend one's life, that sometimes killing may be justified. Killing is never good. Killing another human person is never good. It always is a moral evil. But it may be justified in self-defense. But the church's teaching of self-defense reminds us that we are only to exert as much force as is necessary to halt the aggressor from doing further damage. And back in more primitive times, sometimes that amount of force would cause the death of another person. It's what happens in a defensive war, for example, or if you are defending your own life in a struggle. When it comes to capital punishment, Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict strongly reminded us that in today's society, most civilizations now have bloodless means to defend society against an aggressor, a criminal, that we are able to do that. And Pope Francis has taken that one step further and issued a judgment that reminds us, when we look around at the world today, there really are no places that exist anymore where we cannot contain an aggressor. It is simply not permissible to execute someone for a crime. It doesn't exist. Imagine what would have happened to all of those prostitutes who were converted by John the Baptist if the high priests had their way. They would have been stoned to death. They would have been executed for the crime that they committed because it was a capital crime that violated the law and bred sin in the community. And we have to eradicate it. Had they been executed, they would not have heard the preaching of the gospel. They would not have been converted. They would not be where Jesus tells us they are today. The same thing would have been true for St. Paul. St. Paul was vicious to the early Christians. He imprisoned them, sent them off to prison, some of them probably to death. He was responsible for the death of St. Stephen. Paul should have been executed. Imagine what would have happened if he would have suffered that capital punishment. The gospel would not have been preached in quite the same way. Most of the New Testament would never have been written. The knowledge of Jesus Christ would not have spread as it did. Conversion is necessary for the human heart. Not only have we benefited from conversion, but we must give that to others. And so as Jesus tells us this parable of these two sons, we remember, there are some of us who say yes and then don't follow through. And there are some who say no, and it may make us angry because their no is violent and maybe even destructive. But there is time for conversion. Even the greatest sinners can be converted. The man who killed Maria Goretti was at her canonization mass in St. Peter's and embraced the religious life afterward. Conversion is a gift that belongs to all of us. And on this Respect Life Sunday, we remember that every human life is valuable and has been given the gift of time by the Lord so that he will not lose a single soul.